Happy Christmas everyone, this is 1995 Express and I'm going to be talking about Thomas specials in this video. This year we have seen two specials, one The Adventure Begins and two Sodor's Legend of the Lost Treasure. Now, Sodor Island Forums has stated that if The Adventure Begins is very successful, then a sequel in that line of Railway series adaptations to the TV show might be possible. And considering the fact that next year's special has already been announced as The Great Race, and apparently there's some plot involving the Great Railway Show, I thought that Thomas and the Great Railway Show and Thomas Comes Home would be the best two books to make up the next special. Quite honestly, I don't have any idea what Andrew Brenner is planning to have with this idea. Most of the sources for The Great Race state that everyone's getting ready for the Great Railway Show. I'm not sure if the Great Railway Show is going to feature in a sequel or if it's going to be a prominent plot line in the next special. But if it's the former, then I think that the next Railway series adaptation special should be about Thomas going to the Great Railway Show. And I think that the Great Railway Show and Thomas Comes Home would make a very good special. And, well, to be quite honest, the setup's perfect. I mean, you can start off the episode showing that Sodor is in late fall and winter is about fast approaching, and the engines have all heard the news that the National Railway Museum is holding a Great Railway Show, and they are going to ask one of the Sudrian engines to attend. All the engines come up with their own reasons about attending, James being the most splendid, Gordon being the fastest, and Henry being the most powerful, and Thomas because he's number one. But the bigger engines dismiss this because he seems too small, and well, frankly, he's a tank engine. Of course, we could have a little bit more character involvement by having Stanley and Rosie standing up for Thomas. Yeah, Stanley and Rosie. Remember those two? The two that are always working hard in the background yet never have any speaking role in any episodes at all. It's high time that Stanley and Rosie play a prominent role in a story or two. Anyway, after that, we go to the title credits, and perhaps a new rendition of Little Engines, the song. And then we go through a brief history lesson on the evolution of railways with a lead-up to Sodor being a safe haven for steam engines. And then after that, we cut to the meeting at Tidmouth Sheds. All the engines are gathered round, and the Fat Controller is going to announce who's going to be the special engine to attend the Great Railway Show. And it turns out that it's Thomas. Henry, Gordon, and James are obviously jealous, but Thomas doesn't care. He shares his news with everyone, including Stephen, who shares his experience of being put into a museum after being retired and before Sir Robert Normanby found him. Finally, the big day arrives, and Thomas sets off to the mainland for his journey to the museum. Via the Vickerstown Bridge, of course, not by boat. However, along the way, Thomas crashes into a crossing gate that broke loose and can't travel on the railway anymore because his buffer beam is damaged. Meanwhile, Daisy is seen working on the Arlesburg-Harwick branch line, since Legend of the Lost Treasure rearranged the times table. And by this time, snow has started falling, and the railways are starting to get clogged up. Gordon arrives late complaining that Connor was held up by the snow. Both Daisy and Gordon have a laugh about snow, but it isn't long when the joke is on Daisy, who gets stuck in the snow, and her passengers have to be rescued by Harold. Back to Thomas, who's also having a snow fall on him. He's told that he has to make the rest of the journey by lorry, and despite him being upset by it, he does eventually make it to the museum. But not without receiving a parking ticket because the lorry driver parked in the wrong spot. At the museum, Thomas is greeted by, get this, a replica of Stephen. Now, for the engines in the National Railway Museum that are nameless, I don't really have many. I'm not sure what names would be officially chosen for them, but I'll improvise. Let's call this replica of Stephen Robert for now. Anyway, Thomas is cheered up to see a bit of home here, and eventually finds out how much like home the museum is. In the works where he's repaired, he sees Gordon's brother, Flying Scotsman. Yeah, let's give Flying Scotsman a proper role in the television series now, okay? And of course, there's also Green Arrow. After a good chat between the three engines, Thomas is repaired and allowed into the museum, where he meets so many engines who all but almost share something similar with one friend back home. Or multiple friends, however you put it. Now let's make a list. Let's see, there's Mallard, Spencer's brother and just as arrogant. He doubts that Thomas is special enough to attend the Great Railway Show. And then there's Duchess of Hamilton, who constantly rebukes Mallard for his arrogance, and she once upon a time raised Caitlin. And then there's the Great Northern number 1, let's call her Sophia for now. She's Emily's sister, who is kind and warm-hearted, and has a liking towards Thomas. And then there's Arrowlight, who is Whiff's brother, who clearly states that he was built for passenger service and say that Whiff was and is an oddity for liking trash. And then there's Evening Star, or Eve for short, who is Murdoch's sister. She's a quiet sort, like the gentle giant at Sodor. I'm pretty sure Arca Animations can come up with a good rendering of the 9F class. And then there's Box Hill, an engine Thomas knew from the days on his first railway before coming to Sodor. Now, Box Hill, along with Sophia, is very supportive towards Thomas during his visit. And there's, City of Turo, the celebrity engine who visited Sodor a long time ago, and Thomas is familiar with him of being Duck's friend. And then there's Iron Duke, an elderly engine who worked on the Great Western engine when it was still broad gauge. He poses as a grandfatherly figure to Thomas, who enjoys listening to his stories of his younger years. And then there's Southern Railway's number C1, who resembles Neville. Let's call him Nigel for now. Anyway, he's rebuked for looking cubic, but he ignores the other engines. He's a bit more stronger in terms of sensitivity than Neville is. And then there's the North Staffordshire Railway's number 1, who resembles Stafford, of course. Let's call him Bolton for now. He's a bit more arrogant than Stafford because he thinks that because he's an electric engine, he's better than any other engine because he's cleaner and less noisy and such. But he does defend other engines who are being teased, so somewhere deep inside he has a heart. And then we have the typical Class 08 shunter like Evil Diesel, Splatter and Dodge, Harry and Bird, Sydney and Paxton. Let's call this one Dan. Okay, we have our list. Back to the structure. Thomas feels welcomed by the engines and is soon made into a popular attraction, being put onto the museum's turntable and having guests admire him while the blizzard is blowing outside. A couple of months later, we see spring come to Sodor. Percy is taking care of Annie and Clarabelle while Thomas is away. As the snow is melting, the Hackenbeck stream rises higher. Percy is worried about the tide, but one day he finds it lower than before and is not as worried as before. We then cut to Knapford, where Henry teases the coaches about Thomas deciding to become a museum piece. Percy has to cheer them up before they leave, making them late. And along the way, they cross over the bridge at the stream, which starts collapsing. Fortunately, Percy and his train makes it across before the bridge collapses. Back in the museum, the melted snow means that trains can run again, and Thomas is allowed to take visitors along the demonstration lines. Thomas is worried about the safety precautions at the railway since there are so many people, more than Thomas has ever seen before. One day, someone throws a lunch sack onto the line. Thomas brakes hard, making a noise and a cloud of steam before hitting the sack. This of course frightens the child and alerts the other engines. The child's mother scolds Thomas and goes off to complain to the manager. You know, for this particular segment, it would be nice if we could play out this story in the way Christopher Audrey originally wanted, because he has stated before that this story in particular he wasn't really proud of because it was watered down by the publishers. Can anyone ask Christopher Audrey about how he originally intended this story to go? Anyway, the more snobby engines blame Thomas for the accident, and despite Sophia and Box Hill's defense for him, Thomas feels guilty. Meanwhile, Toby is assigned to take the stone trucks from Farquhar to Knapford Harbor, or should that be Brendan Docks? Anyway, he takes the stone trucks down to the docks and brings up goods trains along Thomas's branch line. One day, Mavis is late to arrive at Farquhar. Toby wonders if Diesel has been leading her astray from her work again, and we have to use that since the lorry accident never happened in the TV series. It is later revealed that Mavis wasn't well, and she soon arrives with the stone trucks. Toby takes the train to the docks, but because of the delay, a huge line of trucks has built up and is waiting for Toby. Toby does his best, but eventually needs to refill with water. His crew, remembering the time Thomas went fishing, bring Toby to Elsbridge and play that joke on him. After getting serious, they take Toby to Farquhar to refill with water, and then return to take the train back up the rest of the way. Meanwhile, at the Great Railway Show, the engines are told that there is going to be rail tours along the main line to the seaside, but the engines argue over who it's going to be. Green Arrow is the lucky engine, but because of the large amount of visitors, they have to add on more coaches, making the train heavier. To Sophia and Box Hill's encouragement, Thomas offers to double head with Green Arrow to give more power. The manager agrees, and they start off on their first tour together. But on the way home, Thomas spots a landslip under the rails and manages to get the trains to stop just in time. Maneuvering the train around the landslip, they return home. A couple of days later, the manager and Sir Topham Hatt arrive to see Thomas. Thomas is worried that he might get a scolding from them for frightening the crowd, but instead, the two men praise him and make him an honorary member of the museum collection. Thomas is pleased, but also feels homesick and asks if he could return to Sodor. The collection engines say goodbye to him and he heads off. Back on Sodor, the engines hear about Thomas's return and eagerly get prepared. Daisy is especially excited and shares the news with George the Steamroller, who is less than enthusiastic. And of course, we have to put George in there for the rest of the plot line. Let's just say he's working on a new road near Arlesburg. And on a special day, Daisy is bringing some passengers from the Arlesburg branch when she runs into a cone left by the construction site George was working at. The cone damages her brakes and she is delayed to have them fixed. She arrives at Knapford just in time to find everyone is waiting for her, and then Thomas returns and everyone greets him with cheers and applause. So there you have it. My ideas for the Great Railway Show. I'm not sure if this is going to be accepted or not, but it would be nice. I know of a couple of other Thomas fans who would like to see the Great Railway Show adapted as a special. And in case anyone was wondering, I did start off a script of this special. So, if anyone wants to have me read it to them, it might take a while, but I could read it piece by piece as time goes on. That is, if everyone wants me to.
Right, that's it for me. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. This is 1995 Express signing off.